Welcome back to Conflicts of Interest. Returning to the show today is our friend Misty Winston. Misty, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. Thanks for having me back. I appreciate it.
Of course, we got some Assange news, in the headlines the past couple of weeks. It's not great news, but I want to bring you on to talk about it and to kind of just catch up on what's going on and then, what's going to happen in the future, especially around like what kind of activism is going to be going on if Assange does come to the U.S. So let's just start with the most recent updates.
So there's actually been a lot. There's a lot going on right now. First of all, the UC Global case has really been kicking off. For those who are not familiar, that is the Spanish security firm who was hired initially to do security at the Ecuadorian embassy, where Julian Assange was obviously staying. And then they were very quickly co-opted after a change of government by the CIA and essentially turned into a spying operation against Julian Assange and all of his visitors. So that case has been ongoing in Spain for some time now. We just had new information revealed that I guess the owner of UC Global, David Morales, had a whole file on his computer literally labeled CIA. He's a real bright guy, apparently. But that information was actually withheld from the courts by the cops. So that has now come forward, which I think will have an incredible bearing on that case. Also, there's a case happening in the United States in New York. 4 American citizens are suing the CIA based on the UC Global spying operation because they were visitors to Julian Assange in the Ecuadorian embassy, and therefore they were also spied upon. So they are saying that their rights as American citizens were acted against, and so they are
Misty,
suing.
is that
Yeah,
the Mike Pompeo case, the one that he's kind of the figurehead of, or is that a different one?
Yeah, no, that is so the UC Global case. Mike Pompeo has been subpoenaed to testify in court in Spain. He is dodging that subpoena. As far as I know, he is yet to testify in that case. But yes, that is the one that is centered around Mike Pompeo. Mike Pompeo was the CIA director at that time when UC Global was co-opted. He was the guy that kind of led the charge on that. And so, yes, that is very Mike Pompeo centered. And that also, as I said, the 4 people who are suing the CIA in the United States, that is also affiliated to the UC Global case. So that is, they did a press conference maybe a week and a half ago ish. The 4 people, the 4 defendants who are, or the four, I don't know what you would call them, the 4 plaintiffs, I guess, who are suing the CIA gave a press conference about a week and a half ago. I covered that, or we streamed that. We streamed that in partnership with Consortium News on the Action for Assange channel. So those are 2 really big developments that are happening right now, ongoing developments. But then, of course, also we have the unfortunate news that the request for appeal, which was submitted, I don't know, like 8 or 9 months ago, was finally ruled on, and it did not go in our favor. It was rejected by a single judge in a 3-page dismissal of the request. So, which is ridiculous to me that it took that long. But as is the case with everything here, they are trying to drag it out for as long as possible. So essentially, where we stand right now is on Tuesday, this past Tuesday, a week from today, last week, the defense team, they had 5 days from the denial in order to submit a new request for appeal. So they did that on Tuesday of last week, and that will be ruled on any minute. If it's denied, he could literally be on a plane within 24 hours headed to the United States. He does have other legal options. There is one more legal avenue that he could pursue, and that is to go to the European Court of Human Rights. There is some tension between the UK and the European Court of Human Rights, so it is unclear whether or not they would even acknowledge a ruling from the European Court of Human Rights. But that is another potential legal avenue that they could pursue. I don't know if that would have any bearing on him being extradited, immediately. He may have to pursue that case from within the United States if that's possible. But it is, I mean, he is genuinely inches away from being on a plane and headed to the country that was recently revealed to be plotting to murder him. So,
Yeah, and this is kind of disturbing and interesting, I guess, of how this has worked out, Misty, because the Assange extradition over these, 4.5 years or 4 years and 3 months now has come so slow that no Americans have followed the story, right?
yeah.
Whenever the CNN put the ticker on the screen for COVID deaths, I was like, oh no, this is terrible, because people then just, it's a part of their daily lives all the time, all the time, all the time. Where with Assange's case, As far as I remember, 3 years ago, they told him that he could go free. And then it's been, appeal after appeal after appeal. And the UK justice system, to Americans, seems pretty stupid. They wear powdered wigs. You have, this
Yeah.
European court potentially being involved. As an American, as a libertarian, if some outside entity, is telling my government, like, how the legal system is supposed to work, I'd be pretty resistant to that. At the same time, and for Assange, whatever, we got to get this guy free. This is about the First Amendment and journalism and all of that. But how can people keep up with this? What are some of the best places to follow the story, not to get misinformation? Because as you're saying, this could happen very quickly after being such a slow crawl for so long.
Yes, and we know that that's intentional, right? I mean, the idea that it is taking so long is very much the planned circumstance. That we know that because Julian Assange released that information through leaked emails through the Stratfor files, and in there they are having a conversation on how to handle their Assange problem. And one of the ways that they discuss is we'll just tie him up in legal stuff for the next 25 years. That's exactly what they're doing. I think it is intentional that they're trying to drag it out. Listen, they are trying to destroy him mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally. And not only are they trying to destroy him, they're trying to dampen any of the support that he has. They're trying to essentially dampen any support that people may have for, the First Amendment, for press freedom, for free speech. They want to, create an environment where people are going to be cheering for the destruction of that. And that is, I mean, there are people who are doing that. So we know that that's the way that they plan to handle the situation. But yeah, it is the best places that you can go to follow this case is I would go for sure to independent media. Mainstream media is a complete nightmare on this issue. They very rarely cover it. And when they do, it is smears and lies and propaganda and spin. So I would say go to somebody like Kevin Gostola, who writes for The Dissenter and Shadowproof. Sorry, I just blanked on the name of it. He actually has a book out as well. You can also follow Stefania Maruzzi, who is an Italian journalist. She is phenomenal. She is so good, and she has been in a years-long battle with multiple countries doing FOIA requests, trying to get information about the kind of the background going on behind the scenes in this case. And she has a book out as well. Obviously, somebody like Chris Hedges, John Pilger, Craig Murray, people like that have been covering this case since the beginning. They have all been there since day one. And so those are people that you can count on to have good information that they are getting from inside sources, from inside the inner circle of the Assange defense team and the family. Obviously, you can follow Gabriel Shipton, who is Julian Assange's brother. He doesn't post super regularly on social media, but he is somebody that if there is something happening, you can be sure that he will be talking about it, and that will be good information. Obviously, you can also speak to on-the-ground activists who have been, in the trenches, getting, trying to get the word out and following the case very closely. But I would say those are probably your best bets in terms of finding legitimate information that isn't skewed by, establishment narratives.
Yeah, I will also say Assange's wife, Stella, is a
Yes,
good follow
obviously.
on Twitter because she will put out, she knows what's going on with the legal team because she's a lawyer and she's, intimately involved in it.
Yeah.
Now you just talked to Assange's brother last week, I believe.
Yeah.
So how'd that conversation go? And, what kind of is the feeling of Assange's family right now?
I think that they're trying to remain hopeful, but are also very realistic about where it stands currently. Gabriel seemed to be encouraged by the growth of support, as am I. I mean, I just in the time that I've been doing this these past many years, the seeing the amount of people who support Assange and who are willing to come forward and speak about the situation is pretty incredible. It's really come a very long way. Obviously, not fast enough, and it's not big enough. But the growth has been really encouraging, and he has been traveling the world essentially. I mean, he's been in Mexico, and obviously he's from Australia. He's been in Europe. He's been in the United States. They've been traveling they did a tour a couple of years ago of different protests and actions, meeting activists and things like that. That was called the Home Run for Julian tour. And then this past year, they've been doing a tour with the film Ithaca, which Gabriel co-produced, and which features both John and Stella. And it's kind of a behind the scenes look at the fight that the family has been going through in order to free Assange. And I think it's a brilliant film. I think everybody should be forced to watch it because something that they've been able to do over the course of this kind of persecution against Assange is they've really managed to dehumanize him in public consciousness. Not only have they basically disappeared him, we don't have any film or videos or interviews, or it's very difficult to get any word from him, all of that. I mean, the family has to be very careful about what they say publicly or what messages they give publicly. But they have also really just kind of been able to create this comic book villain out of Assange in mainstream narratives. And I think that that's been also an intentional play. It's easier to get away with torturing somebody in broad daylight if nobody cares. And so by dehumanizing him, they've managed to do that. And I think that the film really, it really does show him as I mean, he's a person. He's a father and a brother and a son and a husband and all of those things. And I think people forget that. And I think that this kind of brings that back into sharp relief. So, yeah, I think that the family is cautiously optimistic, but also maintaining a very real sense of what they're up against.
Right. So the smear campaign against Assange goes kind of beyond Assange to his supporters. And Misty, you're sitting there right now for anybody who's not watching in a really badass Roger Waters shirt. So
yeah.
I heard on Twitter that this guy is anti-Semitic and likes dressing up as Hitler in Germany and trying to encourage the listeners of his concert to become Nazis. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's totally Roger Waters. It's absurd, Kyle. It is absurd. Roger Waters is one of the most, listen, I don't do celebrity worship. I don't do any of that stuff. But if you were objectively looking at Roger Waters as a human being, as an activist, he has been one of the most consistent people on planet Earth in terms of his politics and his principles. And it's fascinating to me that they attempted to label him as some anti-Semitic, Jew-hating Nazi, when in fact he is simply performing a piece of music that he has been performing for decades, from The Wall. It is also a film. You can go and watch it. And it is widely agreed to be one of the single most anti-fascist pieces of art ever produced. And so the idea that they are trying to spin that as somehow him being a Jew-hating Nazi is mind-blowing to me. It is, I think that it is really kind of backfired, because it is just so absurd to think that Roger Waters is that person. He is definitely not. And he came out with a 25, 28 minute or so video where he explains, and I honestly, he's such a badass that I often think that stuff like that probably doesn't bother him, but I think it does. And he, made that very clear. These are very horrendous accusations to be hurling at somebody. In particular with Roger Waters, his father died when he was 5 months old fighting Nazis. And so I think that he takes this issue very seriously and very personally. And so it is, but yeah, it is absurd that anybody would label Roger Waters as a fascist or, some kind of Nazi. That is ridiculous. He is simply performing a piece of art that he has been doing for decades, in the exact same way that he's always done it. And I think it is just an attempt to, kind of disguise the crimes of Israel, that they like to hide behind the claims of anti-Semitism to protect themselves from being called out for their numerous human rights abuses. But also I think it is an attempt to delegitimize Roger Waters for his support for Assange as well. So I think it was kind of a two-pronged attack. And it, again, just completely ridiculous.
Right. And for anybody who hasn't really kept up with his most recent tour, I think maybe next to the Israel issue, Assange is probably the most central part of kind of the message he's trying to convey. I mean, there's a lot of anti-war messages. It's not just Israel and Assange, but it is very central to it. And that I do wonder if that's part of the reason he's being attacked, is that support for Assange. And Misty, can you imagine how stupid this is? You have somebody who's an artist, right? That's what a musician is. And he's performing. And yeah. If somebody plays a Nazi in a movie, right? Like if somebody has to portray Hitler in a movie, if you have a World War II movie with Hitler in it, if you now call that actor a Nazi, that's just stupid. And it really upsets me that these people don't understand, or at least like some of it was like a critique of Roger Waters, like, message or something like that, where let's argue that, but just calling this guy a Nazi because the character that he was performing in, which by the way, what he wasn't dressed up as a Nazi, it's like the same
No.
costume he's been wearing since the 80s. He just looks like a fascist, like a
Yeah.
fascist from any movie that you've ever seen. And yeah, so anything else on that?
No, I just think again, Roger Waters is there's no Nazi insignia. I know that it's illegal in Germany to have swastikas. There is none. It is two hammers crossed. It's not a Nazi. It's not Nazi insignias or anything like that. It is. That's why it's so completely absurd. And I think that it's a very cynical attack on him. And it has absolutely no reality. There's no reality. It's not based in any reality whatsoever. Roger Waters is very clearly not a fascist. Never has been. Never will be. And simply because he believes that Palestinians deserve to live in freedom and health and safety and out from under the control of a brutal apartheid regime does not make one a Nazi. Quite the opposite.
All right, so let's get back to Assange here, Misty. I guess, are there any other things going on right now with his, case in court that we should be aware of? At antiwar.com, for people who have been, reading the site, Dave DeCamp is covering it. Anytime there's a major update, he writes an article. And then we typically have at least one or two viewpoints a week where we talk about Assange. I think this week we have a Chris Hedges piece that we ran, kind of breaking down some of the latest developments. So, Misty, is there anything else you really think people should know on the, what's actually happening to him going through court? And do you know how his health status is right now?
So his health is not great. I mean,
Okay.
obviously, I think that is to be expected. He's been subjected to psychological torture for over a decade. He's been held in the bowels of Belmarsh for over 4 years now. He has very limited contact with the outside world. He has very limited visitation. He has very limited phone calls. He obviously he's struggling. I mean, he is held essentially in solitary confinement for the most part, with very few exceptions. And I think that would be difficult for anybody to endure for the amount of time that he has had to endure it. So he's not doing well, but he is a very strong person. I think that as Gabriel said, he's very encouraged by the fact that support is growing and that people are holding events and that people are speaking out and fighting back and all of that stuff. So he loves to hear about that. It's very often what him and John will talk about, or the different things, the different actions that are taking place around the world and all of that stuff. So, I mean, I guess I'll just say he's doing as good as he can under the circumstances. He's hanging in there, I'll say. So in terms of what's coming up as far as the case, like I said, they just last week submitted that request for the appeal. If that is approved, which is highly unlikely. I just want to make it clear that we are very much up against it here. But if it is approved, that will then go to a public hearing in front of two different judges. So it won't be the initial judge who just denied the request that we just had denied. So it'll be two different judges. Apparently there will be a public hearing. I'm not sure if they'll actually stick to that. They don't like to do anything in terms of Julian Assange in the public, as we've seen over the past 4 years. So we'll see if that actually holds. I don't think that the appeal will be approved, but we'll see. If the appeal is denied, he could be on a plane within hours and headed to the United States. So people need to be ready to go. I think ready to get loud and rowdy and make a lot of noise about this issue. That is honestly the only thing that stops this. I keep saying it over and over and over again. We're not going to get justice from the court system. They are completely corrupted, completely co-opted. The conflicts of interest involved in all of this stuff, everybody who touches this case has a lot of nefarious and shady connections and deals and all of that stuff. The judge, Jonathan Swift, he has a lot of really nefarious connections. He has said that his favorite clients are like the military and national security agencies. So this is not a guy who is on the side of the people or, freedom or press or any of that stuff. If it's denied, he will possibly be on a plane within hours. Again, as I said, they can go to the European Court of Human Rights. I think that is something that the Assange defense team will absolutely attempt. I think that they're trying throwing everything at the wall. But frankly, the only thing that saves Julian Assange and, puts a stop to the destruction of the First Amendment, at least for right now. That fight doesn't end, but at least it will help to kind of stop the gap for a second, is mass public pressure. That's the only thing. We have to make it politically untenable for them to continue this case. And that only happens if enough people are screaming about it, and making it clear that this is not something that they're going to stand by and watch happen. So we're getting there. I think that we're starting to, as I said, we're seeing the support growing. It's not happening fast enough, in my opinion. I wish it was faster. He can't, I don't know how much longer he can manage the situation he's in, but it is happening. So we really need people to get involved. We need people to, there's going to be on July 3rd, which is Julian's birthday, obviously 4th of July. That's a great time to call attention to the destruction of the First Amendment, right? So there's people are doing banner drops on July 3rd. Anywhere you want to go, if you want to go to like an overpass, make sure you're safe, obviously. But if they have like walkways on your overpass and you can drop a banner over the highway or wherever you want to do it, a lot of people are doing banner drops on July 3rd. There are actions taking place all around the globe all the time. My friend Alex runs the Twitter page and Facebook group. It's called Candles for Assange. It's the number 4. And she does a really great job of trying to collect and compile all of the global actions that are taking place and then posting them from one location, because there's stuff taking place on I mean, London is in the streets 3 times a week. Australia does regular events. Boston does bi-monthly events. Tulsa's constantly in the streets. Seattle's constantly doing stuff. There's stuff taking place all the time, all around the world. So you just, if you can find an event near you and you want to help out, or if you can find a group near you and you want to help out, you can reach out to me. I am happy to connect people and find people in their area to organize with. But again, we really need people to start making an unbelievable amount of noise about this.
Yeah. So, Misty, I'm giving a speech later this week at PortFest, and my speech is going to kind of detail how the politics in America have changed, focusing on Russia because of the Russiagate narrative. But something I didn't even really think to include in there, but I do think is really important, and I think I'm going to add this now, is that the politics of Russiagate really shifted opinion on WikiLeaks and Julian Assange.
Yes.
It's so long ago and so many lives ago, so many mainstream media retractions ago and corrections and editorial notes on all these articles. But, originally, Misty, they were saying that WikiLeaks acted as like a hostile foreign intelligence agency working with Russia to, put out these documents smearing Hillary Clinton. And, even though I don't think people think about that still, that narrative and those feelings for WikiLeaks became embedded, especially the Democratic Party. And I think that's a real roadblock still.
Yes, 100%. There's no question about it. I think previous to 2016, liberals maybe didn't love Assange, but I think they respected him. In fact, he gave a TED talk at one point in a room full of liberals and got a standing ovation. I think that I think they were wary of him just based on what he does. But I think they respected him. But after 2016, and that's what sucks about the politics in the United States, it's incredibly tribal. There's no consistency of principles. And so, if somebody comes at your team, it becomes a personal attack on you, and then you let go of your principles in order to defend your team. And that's really unfortunate because Julian Assange doesn't have a team. He has leaked information, published information about everybody, about Republicans, about Democrats, about governments the world over, about corporations, you name it. And so in doing that, he has made a lot of really powerful people incredibly angry. But yes, I think that the 2016 releases and the way that they attempted to connect him to Russia, despite the fact that there is zero evidence to support that claim that he has any connection to Russia whatsoever, or that Russia was the source for the 2016 DNC emails. That is just not the case. And in fact, it's very interesting to me. People still use that smear. I mean, on a regular basis, I still hear that he is a Russian asset. And despite, again, there's zero evidence to support that. But also it's very interesting to me because, he has been pretty clear about the fact that Russia was not the source for those releases. He has said so, and he very rarely speak. In fact, I don't think I've ever heard him speak about a source, even broadly. And he was very clear about the fact that Russia was absolutely not the source. And people often say, "Oh, you believe him?" Absolutely. This is a guy who has a 100% record of accuracy. He has never gotten it wrong in terms of the WikiLeaks publications. He's never gotten it wrong. I don't think he's willing to jeopardize that record when he didn't even have to say anything. That he wasn't required to say anything at all about that source. And so there's zero evidence to support the claim that he was ever affiliated with Russia. There's zero evidence to support the claim that Russia was the source for the DNC emails. And frankly, it's they say that it was election interference, that he damaged Hillary Clinton. He didn't write the emails. He merely published information that was in the public interest that was given to him. That is his job as a journalist. And so it is. It's really frustrating to me that people are unable to see past their own biases and just recognize that this is about the principle of press freedom. But what can you do? That's the political climate that we live in right now. But yes, I mean, I think you should absolutely include that in your speech, because that has been detrimental to the case against Assange. I think that really was a game changer in terms of public opinion. And that is what we're struggling with now. Like I said, we need mass public pressure. And part of the reason why we can't get it is because a large percentage of the population thinks that he's a Russian asset, and complete lack of evidence for it, but they really do believe that.
Right. And people just don't understand, like, one of the reasons that WikiLeaks is able to do what it does is because they protect their sources so deeply. And so Assange can't come out and say, this is where I got the information, which, well, why doesn't he just come out and say, because you have to protect your sources. Right.
Yeah,
absolutely.
He would never. He was offered a pardon. There was a very loose.
Right. This was the Dana Rohrabacher negotiations.
Yeah. And he refused. And he would absolutely always refuse that. He would never listen. He protected Ed Snowden, and Ed Snowden wasn't his source. It was just a source. Ed Snowden worked with Glenn Greenwald and Laura Poitras. But when Julian Assange heard that there was a leaker, a source who was under threat and desperate to get away, he took great personal risk in order to make sure that Ed Snowden got to safety. And if it weren't for Julian Assange, and Snowden has spoken about this many times himself, if it weren't for Julian Assange, Ed Snowden would very likely be where Julian Assange is now, or worse. And so, that's the kind of person he is. He would absolutely, there's absolutely no way that he would ever reveal a source, ever, in the history of ever. It would not happen.
All right, Misty. So let's wrap up here. But I have, one last question. So, of course, we don't know when anything's going to happen here, and I that's a part of the tactics of the people trying to kill Assange and to kill what Assange means to so many people, and really to destroy journalism. So they could hold him at Belmarsh for 3 months and just bring him to the U.S. under the cover of night and tell us like 2 weeks later. But do we have any idea on, and is anybody kind of planning an event to try to maybe meet Assange at an airport somewhere? I'm guessing he's going to be flying into DC or something. It could be a military base. And I don't mean like meet him, like actually get to see him, but hold a rally at the facility or something like that, the courthouse. Is any of that going on? And then where should we kind of keep an eye out for that information when it does come out?
Well, unfortunately, as you said, it is very likely that they will not tell us when he is coming here. It is almost certain that they will do it under cover of darkness. They will do it in the middle of the night, and then we might hear about it later. I think that is almost certainly going to be the case. I don't think that they're going to announce it in advance. So we're doing our best to keep our ear to the ground. I think activists are trying our best to keep our ears to the ground. We're trying to make sure that we're paying attention. We're listening to Gabriel and Stella and John and all of the other people, all of the lawyers and stuff close to the case, trying to make sure that we have as much information as we can get. But I don't think that there's any way possible that we could plan something, because we don't know when this decision is going to come. There's never any timeline. We never have any specific dates for any of this stuff. Like I said, this past appeal that was denied, it was like 8 or 9 months, and we had no idea when it was coming. We were just all sitting around waiting for it to happen. And so that's par for the course. That has been the case this entire time. They are trying to drag this stuff out indefinitely. So it could be tomorrow. It could be today. It could be 3 months from now. We have no idea. And so it is incredible. And I think that is also intentional, because it makes it incredibly difficult for us to organize and to, get out there and to make sure that we are, they're in force.
Get people fired up, That's one of the things. Like, people don't want to, hear like, oh, in a couple months, I'm going to really need you to be excited about this. They want to hear like, okay, I learned about it. Let me get out there in the streets right now. If you wait a week, they're going to be upset about something else and move on.
Yes, and that's the problem with the limited attention spans with the population. I mean, listen, I have ADHD. I'm not hating here. I totally get it, but that does make it incredibly difficult for us to. I mean, if you tell somebody, hey, Assange is going to be extradited in 10 days, we need you here at this time. I mean, that is much easier than, hey, Assange is going to be extradited sometime soon, maybe in a couple of months. We're not sure. We'll let you know. I mean, that's really difficult in order to kind of rally the troops, so to speak. So yeah, we're just trying to keep our ear to the ground, trying to make sure that we are paying attention to the things that are happening. If he is brought to the United States, I know I will be in Washington, D.C. There's no question about it. I will drop whatever it is that I have going on, and I will be in Washington, D.C. Actually, it'll be Alexandria, Virginia, because that's where the pretrial detention center, also the pretrial detention center that Chelsea Manning was held in, that's where he will almost certainly be held. So I mean, the Assange supporters will show up. We just need other people to come with us. We need other people to, and don't wait. You don't have to wait until he's extradited. You can make noise now. You can start writing letters to the editors of newspapers in your local area. You can start making phone calls to the White House and the Department of Justice. You can start sending emails. You can start making phone calls to your elected representatives. You can start, holding regular events or talking to your friends and your neighbors and your family and all of that stuff, handing out information, sharing links to documentaries or YouTube videos that describe the case, all of those things. Like all of that stuff really does help. It doesn't seem like much. It seems like, oh yeah, a phone call, what's that going to do? But if there are, 500,000 phone calls, that makes an impression, that makes a difference. And so that's really, you don't have to wait for him to come here. In fact, it would be much better if you didn't. We would like to prevent him from being brought here because he is absolutely a suicide risk. And if he learns that he is going to be extradited to the United States, there's a very good chance that he will attempt to end his life. And we need to prevent that. This is a guy who is being held in prison for telling the truth. That it is absurd to me that that is okay with anybody, regardless of how you feel about Assange or what you think about his person. It doesn't matter. It's very bizarre to me that people put their personal feelings about Assange as a person, or even what he did. Even if you disagree with the fact that he released this information, there's no question about the idea that he has done nothing but publish absolute 100% truth that has been in the public interest. And that is the description of a journalist. And so he is literally being charged with journalism. And there is it's mind-blowing to me that people are okay with that. And the idea that people are okay with him being treated the way that he's being treated when the war criminals, literal war criminals that he exposed are, going on Ellen and hanging out at Martha's Vineyard and going to, parties and all of this stuff is, we've really kind of failed as a society when we are okay with a guy who exposed criminals being tortured while the criminals walk free. That's really depressing.
Yeah, and I do think that stuff really does make a difference, Misty, especially in the case of Assange here, because, just looking at, for example, the Yemen war, when I first started talking about that, I would get a lot of, Iranian apologists and things. But, now that you have so many people in Congress who support this, you can say, if it's a Republican, do you think Rand Paul is an Iranian apologist? Does that sound like Rand Paul? Do you think,
No.
Whatever Democrat who's good on this just wants to support the Ayatollah who's forcing women to cover their heads? No, of course not. That's not what this. And so, having like the letter that Rashida Tlaib led and things like that are important. And that's not going to, no matter how good you think a congressman you vote for is, they're not going to do anything, especially after their first or second term, unless they have a lot of political pressure. So
yes,
we need to make that happen. Misty, thank you so much for coming back to the show. You are at Sarcasm Stardust on Twitter. And anything else you want to plug?
No, just again, get out there, follow the people who are covering the Assange case in a real way. Get out there, do what you can with whatever time and money and energy you have. Everybody can do something. So we just really, whatever you can do is greatly appreciated. And as Kyle said, that stuff adds up very quickly. So even if it feels useless or, it's just a phone call or what, yeah, it is just a phone call. And I'm not saying that any one phone call is going to be the thing that sets Julian Assange free, but an accumulation of effort and an accumulation of pressure put on people in positions of power is going to be what sets him free. So we need everybody to pitch in.
Oh, we need to mention your TNT radio show, because I think it's on at a different time since you were last on the show. And look, I know you're on the left, Misty, and I have a mostly, this show is hosted at the Libertarian Institute and everything, but you do have on a Libertarian, myself, Connor Freeman, Dave DeCamp, Patrick McFarlane.
Scott Horton's coming up soon.
Scott Horton. So plenty, like every week there is a libertarian guest on your show. And most of the shows that you have that I listen to aren't, most of the topics covered are things that we're interested in on this show and things that we agree on. So, war, freedom issues and stuff like that. So everybody definitely check out Misty's show. Keep an eye on her Twitter account. She's constantly putting out the links and the guest list and everything like that. And 6 p.m. Eastern, right?
Yep, 6 p.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday on TNT.live. TNTradio.live, I'm sorry.
Thanks, Misty.
Thanks, Kyle.